The moment I saw his name light up on my phone screen, something inside me froze. It wasn't the name itself, it was the timing. Midnight. A message that simply read, "Can we talk tomorrow?" My heart sank before I even opened it. You know that feeling, right? When your gut whispers the truth long before your mind dares to believe it. Ethan had been distant for weeks. The man who once called me every hour, just to hear my voice, now barely texted goodnight. I kept telling myself it was work stress, that we were just going through a phase, the kind of lies we tell ourselves because the truth is too painful to say out loud. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of my room felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath with me. I scrolled through our old messages, the "I love yous," the little jokes, the promises. Every word felt like a ghost now, haunting me with what used to be. By morning, I convinced myself to stay calm. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe he's just tired. So, I made coffee, dressed up a little nicer than usual, and decided to surprise him at his office. It was supposed to be something sweet, a reminder that I still cared, that I was still here, even if he was slipping away. The moment I stepped into the lobby, the receptionist gave me that polite, hesitant smile. "Oh, hi, Mia. He's not in yet," she said quickly, eyes darting toward the door. Strange. He told me he had an early meeting. I waited. 10 minutes, 20, 45. He still hadn't shown up. I finally texted him, "Hey, where are you? Thought I'd surprise you." No reply, but then my phone buzzed. Not from him, from someone else. A friend, or at least someone who used to be one. The message read, "I'm so sorry, Mia. I think you should see this." Arm around another woman. The same man who told me he was too busy for lunch breaks. The same man who swore he'd never lie to me. The photo was taken just hours earlier in the very cafe we used to go to every Sunday morning. The one where we'd laugh over pancakes and talk about our future. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. The coffee in my hand slipped and shattered across the tile. But even that sound couldn't drown out the storm roaring inside my chest. I walked outside, numb. The city around me kept moving, people rushing, cars honking, life going on as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had. My world had tilted, cracked, and I was just standing in the middle of it, trying to hold the pieces together. That night he called. I didn't answer. He called again. Then texted, "Babe, I can explain. Please, don't jump to conclusions. But explanations don't fix betrayal. Words don't erase images." I stared at the screen for a long time, and in that silence, something changed inside me. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. Even the pain felt quieter. I realized he thought I was still the same girl who'd cry and forgive. The same girl who'd believe another round of lies wrapped in apologies. But he was wrong, because that night, I promised myself something. If he wanted to play with my trust, I'd show him what real lessons looked like. Not loud, not messy, just quiet, sharp, unforgettable. And so, the girl who once waited by the phone disappeared that night. The woman who replaced her, she was calm, patient, and dangerously clear. He broke my heart, yes, but what he didn't know was that heartbreak can be the best kind of teacher. Before all this, before the messages, the lies, the heartbreak, Ethan was everything I thought I wanted. He wasn't perfect, but he felt real. We met 2 years ago at a friend's birthday dinner. He was charming, funny, a little too confident for his own good, the kind of man who knew exactly how to make people feel seen. I remember that first night so vividly. He made a joke about the waiter's overcomplicated dessert names, and when I laughed, he turned to me like it was the only sound in the room that mattered. Finally, he said, smiling, "Someone who actually gets my humor." That was it. That one moment, light, simple, harmless, was how it started. After that, we were inseparable. Late-night drives with music too loud, texting until sunrise, laughing about everything and nothing. He'd say things like, "I don't believe in soulmates, but if I did, you'd probably ruin my argument." I thought he was teasing. Now I realize he was warning me not about me ruining his argument, but about him ruining my peace. Ethan had this warmth, this ability to make me feel like I was home even in a crowded room. He'd walk me to my car, open doors, remember how I took my coffee, text me good morning every day without fail. I fell for the consistency, not realizing it was the kind of consistency that fades once the chase is over. Back then, I didn't see the small red flags waving quietly in the background. Like how he hated when I went out with friends but called it missing you too much. Or how he'd get defensive if I asked about his coworkers, saying, "You don't trust me," with that soft tone that made me feel guilty for even asking. But love has a funny way of blinding us. We mistake control for care, excuses for affection. I told myself he just loved deeply, that he was protective, not possessive. I didn't know I was slowly giving him the power to rewrite my boundaries. Still, in those first few months, he made me feel like I was living inside a movie. Weekend getaways, surprise flowers, candlelit dinners on random Tuesdays. He once told me, "I don't ever want you to feel like you're not enough." Those words stuck with me. They became my comfort and eventually my curse. Because the more he said them, the more I tried to be enough. I started saying yes when I wanted to say no. I adjusted my schedule around his. I became softer, quieter, easier to love, or at least easier for him to control. I called it compromise. Now I call it losing myself slowly. Things were beautiful until they weren't. It began subtly. Missed calls, short replies, plans canceled at the last minute. He'd say, "Work's been crazy lately." At first I believed him. Then I wanted to believe him. And finally, I pretended to. There's a difference between trusting someone and trying not to lose them. I wasn't trusting him anymore. I was trying to keep him from slipping away. One night, I remember we were watching a movie, and I noticed he wasn't really there. Not physically, emotionally. His eyes were on the screen, but his mind was miles away. When I asked what was wrong, he smiled faintly and said, "You're imagining things again, Mia." That word "again" hit me hard. It wasn't the first time he'd made me feel like I was crazy for noticing the obvious. It became a pattern. He'd forget things he promised, and when I brought them up, he'd say, "I misunderstood." He'd turn his phone face down when we were together, brush off late-night notifications as work stuff, and start ending our calls early. My instincts screamed that something was wrong. But love teaches us to silence our instincts. It tells us to wait for proof. So I waited, even though, deep down, I already knew. There were still moments that made me question myself, the good moments. Like when he'd surprise me at work with lunch, or when he'd hold me just a little tighter after a long day. Those moments were the traps, the emotional bandages he used to cover the cracks. The first real argument we had was about a woman named Rachel. He mentioned her casually one evening, said she was new at work. Smart and funny, kind of like you. It sounded harmless. But a few weeks later, he started saying her name more often. Rachel handled that project well. Rachel said something hilarious in the meeting. I laughed it off at first, jokingly saying, "You sure Rachel isn't your work wife?" He smiled, but his eyes flickered. That tiny flicker told me more than his words ever would. Soon after, the distance between us became undeniable. He'd leave early, come home late, and when I'd ask how his day was, he'd respond with one-word answers. The warmth that once filled our home was replaced by silence, the kind that hums with unspoken tension. I remember lying awake one night staring at the faint glow of his phone on the nightstand. It buzzed. Twice. He didn't move. Didn't even flinch. But I saw the name flash on the screen for half a second, Rachel. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't say a word. I just stared at the ceiling and felt my heart slowly crack. The next morning, he acted normal. Kissed my forehead, said, "Love you, babe," and walked out the door. I watched him leave, and that's when I knew this wasn't love anymore. This was performance. A routine, a script. And I was the only one still playing her part. That day, I sat in the kitchen for hours, staring at my coffee as it went cold. I kept thinking, when did we stop being us? Was it when he met her? Or long before that, when I started ignoring the truth because it hurt too much? Still, I couldn't walk away. Not yet. I needed to know. I needed to be sure. Because if I was going to lose the man I loved, I wanted to lose him to the truth, not to suspicion. So I started paying attention. To his tone when he said her name, to how quickly he put his phone away, to the sudden late meetings that lasted hours longer than they should. And with every new sign, every little inconsistency, the love I had for him began to crumble, replaced by something colder, sharper, quieter. Not hate, not yet. Just awareness. Awareness that the man I thought I knew was slowly becoming a stranger. Awareness that the promises he made were dissolving right in front of me. Awareness that I wasn't crazy, I was right all along. By the time I saw that photo, the one that confirmed it all, part of me wasn't even surprised. The shock wasn't in the discovery. It was in realizing how long I'd been betraying myself by pretending not to see it. That's what betrayal really is, isn't it? It's not just someone breaking your trust. It's realizing you ignored every red flag, every gut feeling, every warning whisper because you loved them more than you respected yourself. That's what broke me. Not the photo. Not Rachel. Not even Ethan. It was me realizing how far I'd gone trying to hold on to someone who wasn't even trying to stay. But what Ethan didn't know was that the girl who once begged for honesty wasn't here anymore. The woman sitting in that kitchen, watching the steam fade from her untouched coffee, was done waiting. I wasn't going to confront him right away. No, that would have given him the power to twist it, to lie again, to make me feel guilty for finding the truth. Instead, I decided to wait, to watch, to plan. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than shouting. And when it came time for him to face what he'd done, I wanted it to be quiet. Devastatingly quiet. The kind of quiet that makes a person finally hear themselves. And that was the beginning of my revenge. The days after I saw that notification, Rachel felt like walking through a storm no one else could see. Everything looked normal on the outside. We still cooked dinner together, still watched shows on the couch, still kissed goodnight. But inside me something had shifted. Before, I loved him blindly. Now, I saw everything. Every glance at his phone, every late-night text, every carefully chosen excuse. I didn't ask questions anymore. Not because I trusted him, but because I finally didn't believe his answers. I learned quickly that betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It hides in the quiet pauses, in the delayed responses, in the half-hearted smiles that used to be real. And Ethan was whispering lies without even speaking. The first real crack appeared on a Thursday night. He came home later than usual, smelling faintly of cologne he never wore around me. When I asked where he'd been, his voice was steady. Too steady. "Work ran late," he said, tossing his keys on the table like it was nothing. I tilted my head. "At the office?" "Yeah," he replied without blinking. "Big presentation tomorrow." I forced a smile. "Funny. You told me the presentation was next week." For a second, just a fraction of a second, I saw it. The hesitation. The panic he tried to bury behind a casual shrug. "Oh, they moved it up," he said quickly. "Of course," I whispered. But my heart already knew. That night, I lay next to him in bed, staring at the ceiling while he scrolled on his phone with the screen dimmed low. I could hear the faint tapping of his fingers as he typed message after message. I closed my eyes and counted the seconds between his replies. 3 seconds. 5. 8. Whoever he was talking to, the conversation mattered enough to keep him awake while I was pretending to sleep inches away. Once upon a time, I would have rolled over and asked, "Who's texting?" But now, I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to keep lying because every lie was another thread I could pull later. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I never thought I'd be. An observer. A detective. I watched the way he dressed a little sharper than usual. I noticed how often his phone was glued to his hand. How his playlist suddenly changed to songs he used to say he hated. And then there were the small details. The faint lipstick stain I almost missed on his collar. The sudden habit of putting on cologne before late meetings. The way he'd linger in the bathroom for extra minutes after coming home, like he was washing off someone else. Ethan had no idea how transparent he'd become to me. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't care. That hurt more than the betrayal itself. The realization that the man who once held me like I was his world now couldn't even be bothered to hide how easily he was letting it all slip away. One Friday night, the silence between us grew so thick it felt suffocating. We were sitting on the couch, the TV playing some random comedy neither of us was really watching. I turned to him and asked softly, "Do you love me?" He blinked, surprised. "What kind of question is that?" I didn't smile. "Just answer it." He sighed, putting down the remote. "Of course I love you, Mia. Why would you even—" Because love doesn't look like this, I cut in. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was calm. And calmness, I've learned, is more terrifying than screaming. He frowned, leaning back. You're imagining things again. You always do this when what? I asked, leaning forward. When you're lying? That hit him. His jaw clenched, but his eyes flickered again. That same flicker I'd seen weeks ago when Rachel's name first slipped into his sentences. I'm not lying, he said quietly. You're just overthinking everything. Overthinking. That word. The way he used it was like a knife wrapped in velvet. Every time he said it, he wasn't just dismissing my suspicions, he was rewriting my reality. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to pull out my phone and throw every screenshot, every clue, every red flag in his face. But instead, I whispered, okay, because silence is the sharpest blade when they expect war. That night, while he showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't touch it, but I watched. One message after another. And then I saw it. Good night not for me, not to me. I didn't need to open the chat. That single message was louder than anything he could have said. The next morning, he acted like everything was normal, kissed my forehead, smiled that same rehearsed smile, and walked out the door. But something inside me finally clicked. I wasn't the naive girl holding on to hope anymore. I was the woman collecting the last pieces of her shattered trust not to fix them, but to build something far more powerful. Ethan became more careless with time. He'd leave earlier, come home later. He'd smile at his phone like I wasn't sitting right next to him. He even started changing his shirts before leaving, something he never used to do unless it was a date night, and lately, those were never with me. Once, he accidentally called me Rach, just a slip of the tongue over breakfast. He froze. I laughed. That laugh wasn't from humor. It was from the quiet rage boiling beneath my ribs. You okay? He asked nervously. Perfect, I said, sipping my coffee. In that moment, I saw fear in his eyes. He didn't know what scared him, but he felt the shift. He felt that the version of me who begged for answers was gone. The real fracture came on our anniversary. 2 years together. I had planned everything, a quiet dinner at our favorite rooftop restaurant, candles, a view of the city lights. It wasn't about showing off. It was about us. Or at least what used to be us. I waited for him for 2 hours. 2 hours. The restaurant staff started giving me those pitying smiles. I told them he was just stuck in traffic. But deep down, I knew exactly where he was. When he finally walked in, shirt slightly wrinkled, hair too neat for traffic, I forced a smile. Hey, he said breathlessly. Sorry, the meeting. Save it, I interrupted. My voice was steady, but inside I was burning. He sat down awkwardly. Mia, I said I'm sorry. No, you didn't, I replied. You said there was a meeting, but you didn't say you were sorry. He exhaled loudly. Can we not do this right now? It's supposed to be a nice night. I laughed. You missed the nice night, Ethan. His expression shifted, guilt flickering for a second, then disappearing into that defensive wall he'd built lately. You're blowing this out of proportion, he muttered. Am I? I leaned closer. Or are you just tired of pretending? He froze. His silence was all the answer I needed. For the first time, I saw him not as the man I loved, but as the man who was capable of hurting me without even flinching. After that night, our relationship became a quiet war. We didn't yell. We didn't cry. We didn't talk. But everything between us was sharp now. Every touch was rehearsed. Every word was calculated. He started sleeping, facing the other side of the bed. I started setting my alarm earlier than his so I could leave the room before he opened his eyes. The house we built together became a battlefield where no one moved first. But here's the thing about silence. It gives you time to think. And I used every second of it to plan. I started documenting everything, the late-night calls, the receipts, the excuses, the dates that didn't add up. Not because I needed proof for him, but because I wanted proof for me. So when the day came to end, this really and this, there would be no doubt. No hesitation. No chance for him to twist my truth again. One evening, as he showered again, he carelessly left his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. I didn't plan to touch it. I swear I didn't. But curiosity isn't the right word for what I felt. It was clarity demanding confirmation. I opened the messages. Rachel. Their conversation was endless, flirty, intimate. He wasn't just cheating physically, he was giving her the words he used to give me, the late-night jokes, the dreams about the future, the way he said, "I can't wait to see you again." I scrolled further down, and there it was. Of the two of them at a small cafe, his hand on hers, his smile real, the kind I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I didn't cry. Not even a tear, because this was no longer heartbreak. This was clarity. The final puzzle piece I needed to stop doubting myself. I locked his phone and placed it exactly where I found it. When he came out, wrapped in a towel, he kissed my forehead like he hadn't just handed my trust to someone else. That was the moment I made a silent promise to myself. I would never let this version of me, the broken, confused, uncertain girl, exist again. Once you stop begging for love, something changes inside you. Your silence isn't weakness anymore. It's strength. It's control. I began pulling away quietly. I stopped cooking dinner for two, stopped waiting up for him at night, stopped asking where he was going. I watched confusion settle on his face. He didn't understand why I wasn't chasing him anymore, why I wasn't demanding answers. He started asking questions not because he cared, but because he felt the power slipping away. "Why are you so quiet lately?" he asked one evening. I looked up from my book and smiled. "I'm just learning to listen." "To what?" he asked. "To everything I used to ignore." That was the first time I saw fear in his eyes, real fear, not of losing me, but of losing control. 2 nights later, he said he had to work late again. I didn't argue. Instead, I followed him, quietly. He didn't go to the office. He went to that cafe from the photo, and there she was, Rachel, laughing, glowing, holding the hand of the man who once told me I was his forever. I stood across the street, hidden in the shadows, watching, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. It didn't hurt anymore. Not like before. It was just cold. They leaned closer, whispering, smiling, completely unaware that the woman he betrayed wasn't at home waiting anymore. She was right there, witnessing everything and letting it all burn into memory. That night, I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply walked away from the cafe, my steps steady, because that night wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of his reckoning. There's something strange about the moment when a suspicion becomes the truth. It's not as loud as movies make it seem. There's no screaming, no crashing glass, no thunderstorm outside your window. Just silence. A silence so heavy that it presses against your chest, squeezing the air out of your lungs. That's exactly what I felt the night everything finally fell apart. For days after I saw Ethan and Rachel together at the cafe, I moved through life like a ghost. Not because I was broken anymore, but because I was studying him. Every lie he told, every smirk he tried to hide, every moment he thought he was safe, I memorized it all. And for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt prepared. He thought I didn't know. He thought I was still the soft, trusting girlfriend who'd forgive anything for the sake of love. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I started documenting everything, voice notes, screenshots, receipts, not to destroy him yet, but to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that what I felt, the betrayal, the coldness, was real. And the more I saw, the calmer I became. Because when you already know the truth, there's nothing left to fear, only to face. It was a Saturday evening when I decided it was time. No more waiting. No more pretending. I made dinner that night, his favorite meal. The same pasta I used to cook for him when we first moved in together. The same wine we drank when he told me he couldn't imagine his life without me. I set the table with candles and dimmed the lights. Everything looked perfect, almost romantic. When he came home, he froze at the door. "Wow," he said, smiling cautiously. "What's the occasion?" "Nothing," I replied softly, smiling back. "I just felt like doing something special." He stepped closer, kissed my cheek, and said, "You're amazing, you know that." I looked up at him and said, "I used to think so." He didn't catch the weight in my tone, or maybe he chose to ignore it. We sat down. He talked about work, his friends, the new project that kept him so busy lately. I nodded, laughed where I was supposed to. My voice was calm, steady, but my heart, it was pounding like thunder. After dinner, he leaned back, sipping his wine, and said, "See? We're fine. Things are good again." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, things are definitely something." He looked at me strangely. "What's that supposed to mean?" I set my glass down and whispered, "It means I know." The moment, everything shattered. The color drained from his face. "What do you mean, you know?" I looked at him directly for the first time that night. "I know about her." He froze. His fingers tightened around the wine glass. "Mia, listen." "No," I said sharply. "You listen. I know about the texts, the calls, the late nights. I know about Rachel. I saw you with her." His eyes widened, and for a brief second, I saw it, the guilt, the panic. Then, just as quickly, it vanished. He sighed. "Mia, it's not what you think." I laughed. A quiet, hollow laugh. "Please, Ethan, at least respect me enough not to insult my intelligence." He stood up, running a hand through his hair. "Okay, fine. Yes, I met her, but it's not serious. It just happened." "Just happened?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "You don't accidentally fall into someone else's arms, Ethan." He groaned. "You've been distant lately, Mia. Always suspicious, always cold. I needed someone to talk to." My jaw clenched. "So instead of talking to me, you talked to her? That's your excuse?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me. The same way someone looks at a problem they can't solve, frustrated, defensive, guilty, but never truly sorry. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Do you love her?" He hesitated. "No." The pause before his answer said everything. I nodded slowly. That's all I needed to know. Ethan sank back into his chair, rubbing his temples. "Mia, I never meant to hurt you." I stared at him, studying his every word. "Then why did you keep doing it?" "I don't know," he snapped. "Maybe I just felt lost. Maybe I needed to feel something different." "Different?" I repeated, my voice quiet but trembling. "I gave you everything. My time, my trust, my love. And you went looking for different." He looked away, silent. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not now, not in front of him. He didn't deserve my tears anymore. "You could have just left," I whispered. "You could have told me you weren't happy." He looked up, eyes wide with guilt. "I didn't want to hurt you." The irony almost made me laugh. And yet here we are. He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. For a moment, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, fear of losing control, not fear of losing me. That's when I realized he wasn't sorry because of what he'd done. He was sorry because he got caught. "Please," he said softly. "Can we just start over?" I stared at him. "Start over?" "Ethan, you broke something that can't be fixed. You didn't just lie to me. You made me doubt myself. You made me question every good thing I ever felt." He swallowed hard. "I can make it right." "No," I said. "You can't." I stood up, walked over to the drawer, and pulled out a small envelope. I tossed it on the table in front of him. Inside were printed screenshots, messages between him and Rachel. Dates, times, locations. He looked down, then back at me. "You went through my phone?" "I went through our life," I replied coldly. "And I found the truth you buried under your excuses." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left for him to say. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence that marks the end of something beautiful. He finally whispered, "So what now?" I looked at him, the man I once imagined growing old with, and said, "Now, you pack your things." He blinked. "You're kicking me out." "No, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "I'm setting myself free." He stared at me for a long moment, searching for the girl he could manipulate. But she wasn't there anymore. After a few seconds, he stood up and said, "You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but at least I'll regret it alone." When the door closed behind him that night, I stood in silence for what felt like hours. Every sound in the house felt amplified: the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, my own heartbeat. I walked into the bedroom, looked at the empty side of the bed, and for the first time, it didn't hurt. It just was. I opened the window and let the cold night air fill the room. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. But then, the tears came. Not soft, cinematic tears, real, messy, painful ones. Because no matter how strong you think you are, betrayal still leaves scars. I cried until the sky started to lighten outside. And when the sun rose, I wiped my face and whispered to myself, "This isn't the end of my story. It's the end of his chapter in it." The next morning, Ethan tried calling, then texting. Apologies, promises, regrets. But I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I finally understood something. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you decide for yourself. I went through the house, collecting the pieces of our shared life, the photos, the souvenirs, the memories trapped in physical things. Some I kept. Most I boxed away. Then I sat down with a cup of coffee, looked around my now quiet apartment, and smiled. For the first time in a long time, it felt like mine again. A few days later, he showed up at my door. I didn't open it, but I listened from behind it as he spoke. "Mia, please. I made a mistake. I miss you. I miss us." His voice cracked a little. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't, but it didn't matter anymore. I slipped a note under the door, just one sentence. "You didn't lose me because of Rachel. You lost me because you stopped choosing me." There was silence, then footsteps, then nothing. And with that, the story of us ended. It's strange, people always talk about revenge like it has to be loud, destructive, dramatic. But the most powerful revenge? It's silence. It's walking away with your peace intact while they drown in their own guilt. I didn't need to expose him. I didn't need to humiliate him. Because the truth has a way of echoing long after words fade. And I knew, deep down, he'd wake up one day next to her and feel the emptiness of what he'd thrown away. As for me, I started again, slowly, new routines, new smiles, new strength. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who had been broken but rebuilt herself without needing anyone's apology. That's when I realized, betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise after it does. They say revenge is best served cold, but in my experience it's better served quietly when no one sees it coming, and when it doesn't look like revenge at all. After Ethan walked out that night, I didn't scream, I didn't beg, and I didn't chase. I simply disappeared from his world. But here's the thing about people like Ethan, they thrive on control. And when you take that control away, they crumble. That was the beginning of my plan not to destroy him, but to make him see himself. To make him face the truth he'd been hiding behind excuses and charm. And to make sure, by the end, he'd wish he never underestimated me. For the first time in years, I stopped replying to his messages. No closure, no explanation, no angry texts, nothing. I became a ghost in his life. It was harder than I'd like to admit. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart still reacted before my mind could stop it. But I reminded myself he didn't deserve a reaction. He didn't deserve my energy. After a week of silence, his messages started to shift. At first, they were defensive. "You're overreacting. It wasn't that serious." Then they turned desperate. "Please, can we talk? I miss you." And finally, remorseful. "You didn't deserve this. I'm sorry." But I didn't answer. Because I wasn't ready to forgive. I was preparing to teach. A few weeks passed. I threw myself into my work, joined a new art class, started running in the mornings again, things I hadn't done in ages because I was too busy revolving around his orbit. It felt liberating, but also strange. Like learning to walk again after forgetting how to move. One day, a friend sent me a screenshot from social media. Ethan had posted a picture with Rachel, the same woman he swore wasn't serious. His caption read, "Real happiness doesn't need to be explained." I stared at it for a while, not with pain, but with clarity. He wasn't happy. He was performing. And I knew exactly how to play my part in that performance. That's when my plan truly began to take shape. I didn't want revenge that left scars. I wanted impact. Something subtle, poetic, something he'd remember every time he saw her face. So I started to build my new life not in secret, but in silence. I began posting small glimpses online, a coffee cup at a new cafe, a smile in the sunlight, a hand-drawn painting with the caption, "Healing looks good on me." Nothing direct. Nothing bitter, just radiant peace. The kind of peace that eats away at someone who broke it. Within days, his name popped up in my story views over and over again. He wasn't commenting, he wasn't liking, but he was watching. That was all I needed. 2 months later, I got a text from a mutual friend, a wedding invitation. It was for Sarah, one of our old college friends. Ethan and I had attended her engagement together, and now she was getting married. I hesitated for a moment, then smiled. Perfect timing, I whispered, because I knew Ethan and Rachel would be there. And if there's one thing betrayal hates, it's seeing what it lost thriving without effort. I spent the whole afternoon getting ready, not out of vanity, but intention. My reflection in the mirror looked different, stronger, sharper, softer in the right places, but harder in the eyes. I wore a simple black satin dress, elegant but understated. No sparkle, no drama, just confidence. Because power doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it just needs to walk in silently and make everyone turn their head. When I arrived, the room buzzed with laughter and music. And then, like fate, I saw him. Ethan. Standing near the bar, his hand loosely around Rachel's waist. For a moment, I froze. Not because I missed him, but because it was surreal seeing him like that, the same man who once felt like my whole world, now reduced to a stranger holding someone else's hand. He saw me, and in that split second, his entire expression changed. The confident smirk vanished. His eyes widened, his body stiffened. I smiled politely, raised my glass slightly, and turned away. Nothing dramatic, just enough for him to know I was fine. Better than fine. Over the next hour, I could feel his gaze following me. Rachel noticed, of course. She leaned closer to him, laughed louder, touched his arm more often, the classic signs of insecurity disguised as confidence. I didn't need to say a word, because silence is louder when it's deliberate. When I eventually walked past them, I smiled gently. "Hey, Ethan, it's been a while." He stammered, "Yeah, it's good to see you." "You too," I replied calmly. "You look, well," Rachel's smile tightened. "You two know each other?" Ethan cleared his throat. "Yeah, we used to date." I smiled again, tilting my head slightly. Used to, past tense. Then I turned and walked away. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense, but it was perfect, because in that tiny moment in front of everyone, I gave him what he'd given me, a reminder that he was replaceable. Over the next few weeks, the ripple effect began. Mutual friends started telling me things. "Ethan seems off lately. Rachel's been asking questions about you. He said you've changed a lot." And every time I heard it, I smiled to myself. Because change was the point. People like Ethan don't handle stillness well. They crave reaction. When you take that away, when you move on without explaining, without dramatics, it drives them mad. That's the irony of revenge. It doesn't always require action. Sometimes it's the absence of reaction that breaks them. One night, weeks later, I got another text. It was short. "I made a mistake. I hope you're happy." For a long time, I stared at it. Not with bitterness, but gratitude. Because in that moment, I realized I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't even care enough to reply. That's when I finally felt free. A few days later, I posted one last thing online. It wasn't directed at him, but I knew he'd see it. It was a short clip from my art studio, the camera panning over a half-finished painting. The caption read, "Some broken things don't need fixing, they become art instead." That post went viral among my small circle. People commented things like, "So powerful, this hits deep, you look peaceful." But the best part? Ethan saw it. I knew because, for the first time since our breakup, he liked the post, then immediately unliked it. That single act told me everything. He was still watching, still haunted, and that was enough. That was my final say. I didn't destroy him. I didn't expose him. I simply removed myself from his story and started writing my own. Because revenge doesn't always have to hurt someone else. Sometimes it's about healing yourself so completely that their memory no longer controls you. Ethan taught me the cost of giving too much, but he also taught me the value of walking away gracefully. Now, when I see him around town, and yes, it's happened a few times, he always looks smaller somehow. Like he's still carrying the weight of his choices while I've learned to let mine go. And maybe that's what poetic justice really is. Not watching them fall, but watching yourself rise. You know what's funny about life? It has this strange way of bringing everything full circle. Even the things you think you've buried deep under silence. They resurface, not as revenge, but as truth. And that's exactly what happened next. It was a late Thursday evening. I was sitting in my studio, lost in painting something abstract, something that felt like peace. The playlist in the background was soft, gentle, the kind of music that heals you without words. Then my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. For a moment I thought about ignoring it, but something made me look. It was a message from Rachel. "Hey Mia, I know this might be weird, but can we talk?" I froze. Of all the people I expected to hear from, she was at the very bottom of the list. I stared at the message, my brush still midair, a drop of blue paint sliding down its edge like a tear. After a few seconds, I typed back about what? Her reply came almost instantly. "It's about Ethan. I think I need to understand what happened between you two." I exhaled slowly, set the brush down, and leaned back in my chair. I didn't owe her anything, not an explanation, not a conversation. But something about her tone didn't sound defensive. It sounded broken. So I agreed. Okay, coffee tomorrow, noon. The next day, I arrived early. The cafe was quiet. The air smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans. I chose a corner seat by the window, the same seat I used to sit in when I'd wait for Ethan. How poetic, I thought. When Rachel walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. Her smile was polite, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mia," she said softly. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded. "It's okay. What's going on?" She sat down, fidgeting with her cup. I don't even know where to start. I thought I knew him, but lately..." Her voice broke. She inhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. "He's been different, distant, angry, and when I asked what's wrong, he just shuts down." I listened quietly. There was no satisfaction in hearing it, only a quiet recognition. "I'm sorry," I said finally, "but I'm not surprised." She looked up. "He told me you were controlling, that you made him feel trapped. But the more time passes, the more I realize maybe he was the one doing that to me." I said nothing. I just let the silence speak for itself. She continued. "The other night I found his old messages. With you, he never deleted them. There were hundreds." Her eyes glistened. "He still reads them, Mia. It's like he's stuck somewhere between who he was with you and who he's pretending to be with me." For a long time, I didn't respond, because that was the moment I understood the truth. Ethan's punishment had never needed my help. He was already living it. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing more, not because I wanted to, but because people kept telling me. Ethan had changed. He was moody, impatient, distracted. The company he worked for had gone through layoffs, and his name was on the list. He tried freelancing, but nothing stuck. Apparently, Rachel had left him soon after our meeting. No drama, no public fight, she just packed up and moved out. And suddenly, the man who once believed he could replace me without consequence was standing in the wreckage of his own choices. But here's the thing, I didn't celebrate. I didn't dance in his downfall or smile at his pain. Because true closure doesn't come from seeing them suffer, it comes from realizing you've grown past the need to care. Months later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I went to a local art exhibition. It was hosted by one of my mentors, a small event. Nothing grand. I was browsing through the paintings when I heard a voice behind me. "Mia," I turned. And there he was. Ethan. He looked different. Not in the way time changes a person, but in the way regret does. His eyes had lost that spark of careless confidence. There were faint lines on his forehead, and he stood with the kind of posture that carried invisible weight. "Hey," I said simply. "Hey," he echoed, his voice soft. "It's been a long time." "Yeah, it has." He glanced at the painting in front of me, one of mine, though he didn't seem to realize it. "It's beautiful," he said. "Feels peaceful." I smiled faintly. "Thank you." He hesitated, then asked, "How have you been?" I turned to face him fully. "Good, really good." He nodded slowly, eyes lowering. "That's nice to hear." There was a pause, the kind that carries unsaid apologies. Then, in a quiet voice, he asked, "Do you ever think about us?" It was such a simple question, but it felt heavy. Not because of nostalgia, but because I realized I didn't. Not anymore. "Sometimes," I said honestly, "but not in the way you think. I think about who I was back then, how small I made myself trying to be enough for someone who never intended to see me." His jaw tightened. His voice cracked a little. "I messed everything up, didn't I?" I looked at him not with anger, but with empathy. "Yes," I said softly, "but maybe you needed to understand what you lost." He nodded, swallowing hard. I thought moving on would be easy. That I could just start over. "But you were right, some things follow you, even when you pretend they don't." I didn't reply. I just let the silence sit between us, calm and final. He finally said, "I'm happy you're doing well. You deserve that." I smiled, this time genuinely. "Thank you, Ethan. Take care of yourself." Then I turned and walked away, not out of pride, but peace. For the first time, there was no ache in my chest, no lingering question of what if. Because I finally understood, closure doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with indifference. In the weeks that followed, I kept creating. My art began gaining recognition, small features in local magazines, invitations to collaborate. People resonated with my work because it carried something real: emotion, resilience, reflection. I got messages from strangers saying things like, "Your paintings make me feel understood. It's like you turned pain into color." And that's when it hit me my heartbreak had become my art. My revenge wasn't in what I took from him. It was in what I built after him. Ethan, meanwhile, faded quietly into the background. I'd see glimpses of him on social media, sometimes job posts, travel pictures, forced smiles, but the light in his eyes was gone. Because when someone lives a lie long enough, even the truth stops recognizing them. Sometimes the hardest part isn't losing them. It's losing the version of yourself that believed you couldn't live without them. That was me once, the girl who thought love meant sacrifice, who believed that forgiving him meant forgetting what he'd done. But I've learned something deeper. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means accepting it did, and choosing not to let it define you anymore. When I finally looked back, I realized everything he broke in me had rebuilt stronger. Every tear had taught me balance. Every lie had sharpened my intuition. He thought he'd destroyed me, but all he did was clear the space I needed to find myself. He once told me I was too emotional, that I cared too much. Maybe that was true. But caring deeply isn't weakness, it's strength in disguise. Because when someone shatters your heart and you still choose to love, to trust, to grow, that's power they'll never understand. Ethan lost me the moment he thought I'd chase him. What he didn't know was, my silence wasn't surrender. It was the sound of me rebuilding. Months later, my art studio held its first independent exhibition, Echoes of Her. Each painting represented a chapter of my journey: loss, discovery, and rebirth. As people walked through, I watched them pause at one particular piece. It was called Unfinished Goodbye. A silhouette of two figures drifting apart, one fading into shadow, the other stepping into light. When the event ended, I stood there alone, staring at it. And for a moment I whispered to the empty room, "You were the lesson I didn't know I needed." Then I turned off the lights and walked out smiling, peaceful, whole. In the end, he broke his own heart trying to break mine. And that's the thing about karma, it doesn't ask for permission. It simply arrives when you've already moved on. There's a strange silence that follows heartbreak. Not the kind filled with tears or noise, but a deep, almost holy quiet. It's the silence of becoming. For a long time, I used to fill my world with distractions, music, scrolling, endless calls with people I didn't really connect with. Anything to drown out the echo of him. But when I finally stopped running, I found peace. And it wasn't in forgetting him. It was in remembering myself. The days after seeing Ethan at the gallery were unexpectedly calm. There were no emotional flashbacks, no sudden breakdowns, just stillness. It was as if my heart had finally put down a heavy bag it had been carrying for years. For the first time in so long, I woke up without that knot in my chest. I opened my curtains and didn't think about how he'd once loved mornings. I brewed coffee and didn't hear his laugh echoing from the kitchen. I simply existed, and it felt enough. Healing, I realized, doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly in the way your favorite song doesn't hurt anymore. In the way you stop checking your phone at 11:11 to see if they messaged. In the way you can walk past the places that once made you ache and just smile. That's what healing looked like for me. I started doing small things just for me. Taking long walks without a destination. Wearing lipstick again, not for attention, but because it made me feel alive. Cooking meals I used to make for us, but this time lighting a candle and sitting at the table for one, like it was still a celebration. Because it was a celebration of me. People around me noticed the change. My best friend Lily once said, "You look lighter, like you're finally breathing again." I laughed softly. Maybe I am. I began journaling every night before bed. Not about Ethan anymore, but about my dreams, my goals, my gratitude. And slowly, the story I'd been telling myself that I was a victim, that I'd lost everything, began to change. I wasn't a victim. I was the main character of a story that simply took a painful turn before finding its strength. My art career started to unfold in ways I hadn't expected. A curator who'd attended echoes of her reached out saying my work carried emotional truth. She invited me to collaborate on a new exhibition in another city, a bigger, more prestigious space. For a moment, I hesitated. The old me would have asked someone else what to do. The new me didn't need permission. I said yes. Preparing for that show became a journey of rediscovery. I poured my heart into every stroke, every color. One painting in particular was my favorite, Freedom Wears Silence. It showed a woman standing at the edge of a cliff at sunrise, her back to the viewer. She wasn't jumping, she wasn't running, she was just standing. Whole. That's what peace looked like to me. During the exhibit, I watched people stare at it for minutes, their eyes softening. A few even cried quietly. And for the first time in years, I felt a different kind of validation, not from being loved, but from being understood. A month later, I received a letter, not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter in a simple brown envelope. The handwriting was familiar. It was Ethan's. For a moment, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Another part wanted to read it not out of longing, but closure. So I opened it. "Mia, I don't know if I deserve to write this, but I need to say it. I've spent months trying to find the right words, and I still don't know if they exist. But I'll try. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I said things I didn't mean. I lied to myself more than I lied to you. Rachel's gone. The job's gone. And maybe it's my turn to finally face what I've done. I see you now, your art, your strength. Everyone sees it. And every time I do, I think, she's everything I was too blind to appreciate. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're happy. Ethan." I folded the letter slowly and set it down. No tears, no anger, just quiet. For the first time, I felt compassion not for him as the man who hurt me, but for the broken human trying to find redemption. I didn't reply, because some stories don't need epilogues. They just need endings. Months later, during one of my art classes, I met someone new. His name was Daniel, a photographer helping with the gallery's promotional work. He wasn't loud or overly charming. He was gentle, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke. At first, I kept my distance, because when you've been betrayed, trust doesn't come easy. But Daniel never rushed me. He didn't demand to know my past or promise to fix me. He just showed up consistently, quietly, kindly. He'd say things like, "Your silence says more than words ever could." Or, "You don't have to be okay every day. I like you even when you're not." And slowly, I started to believe again not just in love, but in the idea that love could be safe. One evening, as we walked by the river after my exhibition, he turned to me and said, "You know, sometimes broken things don't need fixing. They just need to be seen." I smiled. "You're right. That's how light gets in." And when he took my hand, it didn't feel like filling a void. It felt like holding peace. Years passed quietly after that. I moved to a small house by the coast, a place filled with sunlight, canvases, and laughter. I started hosting weekend art retreats for women, those rebuilding after heartbreak, loss, betrayal. We painted, we talked, we healed together. and every time I saw someone's eyes light up with hope again, I felt that same warmth bloom in my chest. This was my purpose now, turning pain into power, scars into stories. People often asked me, "Do you ever think about the past?" And I'd smile. Of course I do, but not with sadness, with gratitude. Because that chapter, as dark as it was, gave me the strength to write all the others. You can't teach someone how to value you, you can only show them how to lose you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't payback, it's peace. Not proving them wrong, but proving yourself right by living a life so full they can't imagine it without you. He thought he ended my story, but all he did was remove himself from a chapter he no longer deserved to be in. If you're listening to this, to my story, remember, you don't need to destroy them to rise. Just rise so high they have to look up to find what they lost. One morning, years later, I received an invitation to a major national art exhibition. They wanted to feature Freedom Wears Silence, the same painting I created when I first began to heal. Standing there at that event, surrounded by people admiring the piece that symbolized my rebirth, I realized something profound. Life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning how to paint with it. Pain doesn't ruin you, it refines you. It strips away everything that's false until only the truth of who you are remains. As the lights dimmed and the crowd clapped, I whispered to myself, This is my final say. And it wasn't about Ethan anymore. It was about every version of me that survived him. I once thought revenge meant making them regret losing me. But real revenge is building a life so peaceful, so radiant, that regret becomes their quiet companion and peace becomes mine. It's strange how life circles back to peace, how the very storms that once broke you eventually lead you home. Years after Ethan's betrayal, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my little coastal house. The sea was calm, the air soft, the horizon painted in gold and violet. And as I sipped my tea, watching waves break against the rocks, I realized something. This was what I had been chasing all along, not love, not closure, not revenge, just peace. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I write letters I never send. Letters to people who left, letters to people who hurt me. But most often, letters to myself. That night, I picked up my notebook, the same one I started the night I walked away from Ethan, and I wrote, "Dear me, you thought your world ended the day he betrayed you. You thought no one could ever break your heart like that and leave you standing. But look at you now. You survived. You turned the pain into art, the heartbreak into fire. You didn't just rebuild, you reinvented. You learned that love isn't about losing yourself to keep someone else. It's about finding someone who meets you where you already are. You learned that closure doesn't come from an apology. It comes from understanding that you deserved better all along. And you learned that revenge doesn't mean destruction. It means evolution. When I finished writing, I closed the notebook and smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't come from joy but from peace. When people hear my story, they often ask, "Did you ever get back at him?" And I always answer the same way, "No, I got ahead of him." Because here's the truth I've learned, revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be cruel. It doesn't even have to involve them at all. The most powerful revenge is quiet. It's when you heal so deeply that their name doesn't sting anymore. It's when your success is genuine, not performative. When your peace doesn't need an audience. I didn't ruin Ethan's life. Life did that naturally through his choices, his lies, his emptiness. But I didn't need to witness it. Because my healing wasn't about him losing. It was about me winning myself back. A few months after my national exhibition, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment seminar. I didn't think anyone would want to hear my story, but the organizers insisted. "Just share what you've lived," they said. That's enough. Standing on that stage, looking at hundreds of faces, young, old, hopeful, heartbroken, I realized every single person there had a version of my story. Different names, different details, but the same ache. I began slowly. I once thought revenge meant making someone pay. I thought justice meant balance, eye for an eye, heartbreak for heartbreak. But the truth is, revenge isn't about them. It's about you, about how you rise, about what you become when the world breaks your heart. There was silence in the room. Not the uncomfortable kind, the sacred kind. One woman in the front row had tears streaming down her face. Later, she came up to me and whispered, "I was about to give up. Hearing you made me believe I can start again." That moment right there was my closure. Not the message from Ethan, not the success, but this knowing my story had become someone else's hope. After that, I decided to create something bigger than myself, a community project called The Final Say. It was a creative retreat where women could share their stories, paint, write, rebuild. We didn't talk about the people who hurt us, we talked about who we became after them. We didn't cry about endings, we celebrated new beginnings. One evening, during a group session, I asked everyone to paint a single word that defined their healing. Some wrote strength, others wrote freedom, a few wrote forgiveness. When it was my turn, I painted one word in bold strokes, peace, because peace was my revenge. Peace was my closure. Peace was my final say. Life has a strange sense of timing. A few years later, at another exhibition in the city, I saw him again. Ethan. He looked older, not in age but in spirit. His charm was gone, replaced by exhaustion. When he saw me, he froze for a second, then smiled that same polite, practiced smile. "Mia," he said softly, "you look different." I smiled back. "I am." We stood there for a moment, two people who once loved, once hurt, now strangers connected by a ghost of what used to be. He finally said, "You've done amazing things. I've followed your work." "Thank you," I replied simply. Then, as I began to walk away, he added quietly, "You really got the final say, didn't you?" I stopped, turned, and with the calmest voice I've ever had, I said, "No, Ethan, life did." And I walked away for good. You can't control how people treat you, but you can control how long you let them. The hardest goodbyes aren't to people, they're to the versions of yourself that accepted less than you deserved. Healing isn't linear. Some days you'll wake up strong, others you'll fall apart. But every day you choose to keep going, you win. People who betray you often teach you the deepest form of self-love, the one that says, "I will never let anyone make me question my worth again." Don't chase closure. Chase peace. Closure is about the past. Peace is about your future. One quiet Sunday, I found myself walking through the neighborhood where Ethan and I once lived. I didn't plan it, it just happened. I passed the little cafe we used to visit, the bookstore where he bought me my favorite novel, the old apartment building with the broken streetlight. For a moment, I stood outside the door that used to be ours. Memories flickered like ghosts' laughter, fights, late-night whispers, but there was no pain anymore, just nostalgia soft, almost kind. I whispered to that younger version of myself who once lived behind that door, "You did your best. You loved with everything you had, and that's enough." Then I turned and walked away, not because I hated what was behind me, but because I finally loved what was ahead. Years later, when I published my first book, The Final Say, I dedicated it not to Ethan, but to the girl I used to be. To the girl who believed love had to hurt to be real. To the girl who thought she needed someone to complete her. In interviews, people often asked, "What would you say to the person who betrayed you?" I always smiled and answered, "Thank you. You were the lesson that made me the woman I am today." Because in a strange, twisted way, he did me a favor. He ended a version of my life that wasn't meant to last so I could start the one that was. If you're listening to this and you've been betrayed, let me tell you something, it's not the end. It's the beginning. The moment someone breaks you is the same moment you start to rebuild stronger. You will cry. You will doubt. You will think it's over. But one day, you'll wake up, and it won't hurt anymore. And that day, that silent, peaceful morning will be your victory. Don't waste your revenge trying to make them regret losing you. Spend it becoming so whole that they wouldn't recognize the person they broke. Let your success be your silence. Let your peace be your response. Because when you stop trying to prove them wrong, that's when you truly win. The last line of my book reads, "Sometimes the loudest revenge isn't words or success or even forgiveness. It's silence, the kind that comes from finally loving yourself enough to move on." That's what I want everyone to understand. The story was never about Ethan. It was never about betrayal or even revenge. It was about me. About rediscovering my worth in the ruins. about turning pain into purpose. And maybe that's what life is, a series of endings that are really just beginnings in disguise. Soft music swells. Ocean waves fade into the background. He broke my trust. He shattered my heart. But he also set me free. I didn't destroy him. I didn't chase revenge. I simply became everything he thought I couldn't be. And that was my final say.